This is the phone you were supposed to get, the BlackBerry Q10. Now, of course, the BlackBerry Z10 is a good phone. It's all touchscreen, but it's not the classic BlackBerry that people wanted. It didn't have the physical keyboard, and now you get that with the Q10, a QWERTY keyboard running the new BlackBerry 10 software. This is Andrew from MobileBurn.com. Let's take a look at the Q10 now. The BlackBerry Q10 has a nice, attractive body. When you look on the back, it kind of looks like it has carbon fiber, but it's really just a really smooth coating that they put on the back. It feels very nice, and that coating extends and wraps around the side until you get to the hard sides, and the entire build just feels nice all around. It definitely feels like a premium device. When you look at the phone itself, obviously the thing that sticks out is the keyboard. Now, it's reminiscent of the BlackBerry Bold in terms of shape, but when you look at the keyboard itself, you can see that that's something that's new. Old style Blackberries typically had physical buttons and a trackball, so the keys had to kind of curve around. This is something that's new. It's all about being straight lines. They're divided by these little fake metal little dividers. And the keys, let me see if I can get it in focus. The keys are kind of sloped in or slanted, so each one is raised. So when you tap on F, it discourages you from lifting your finger up and hitting G by accident. So when you're tapping on it, everything should feel nice. You should definitely get a nice feedback to it. We'll get back to the keyboard later on, but for now, let's just tour the hardware. On the right-hand side, you have micro USB charging and micro HDMI in case you want to connect it to another TV. You can also do wireless pairing to play it on media services. On the right, you have your volume up and down buttons, and you have like this little action button here. This is cool because when you unlock the screen and you tap here, it automatically knows to go into, when you hold down on it, it goes into voice services, and you can do voice searches that way. If you're playing music, if you tap that button, it automatically pauses the music or resumes it as well. So that's a nice little feature. Down at the bottom, you have the speaker port. Now, the volume isn't going to be crazy high, but it is a bit louder than you would expect for a device of this size, and it has solid quality. So whether you're on speakerphone or listening to music, you know, it's going to be good. When you're on city level streets, not going to be the best, but indoors, it's definitely surprisingly loud. And of course, you have at the top, you have your power button as well as a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. When it comes to the screen, it has a 3.1 inch display. Obviously, it's going to be boxy. It's 720 by 720. So that square display that's going to be very high in terms of pixel count leads to a lot of clarity. Now, this is a Super AMOLED display, so it's going to have the same trappings and the same benefits that you typically see in Super AMOLED. The colors are going to be well saturated, the reds in particular, and the oranges and colors along that line. But it's not going to be as dynamic as you see with IPS Plus displays. At the same time, it's still going to be good. In terms of outdoor visibility, you have to crank it up to full, and it's going to be reflective, but you still shouldn't have any issues in terms of seeing what's going on. One of the benefits to having Super AMOLED displays is that you'll notice in certain apps, when you have a black background, that's by design, because black tends to render better on Super AMOLED and it uses less energy. So when you're in the calendar, the contact apps, or certain apps that are built into BlackBerry 10, you'll notice a black theme rather than a white background because it works better. Doesn't always work that way. For instance, when you go into the settings, you'll see it's still a white background, but at the same time, it improves battery life because they set it up that way. While we're on the subject of battery life, when you flip it around, it has a 2100 milliamp battery. Now with that smaller screen, the AMOLED benefits, you should see the entire day without having to reach for your power charge at any time. While I'm back here, I can also point out it has a 32 gigabyte micro SD card, 16 gigabytes of internal storage. It has a 1.5 gigahertz dual core processor, pretty much the same that you saw in the Z10. Has an 8 megapixel camera with LED flash, a gig of RAM, and on the front, a 2 megapixel front-facing camera for video calling. There's also a notification light letting me know when I have new alerts. And the interesting way that BlackBerry software handles notification is that I always see it on the left hand side. You see, I have Facebook, Twitter, and email updates. And I have upcoming announcements for my calendar. But I can actually bypass the lock screen completely. It's an option. By swiping up, and you see it jumps directly into what I need to do. But I did have notifications, and for that, whenever I'm in an app and I scroll up, you see the notifications appear on the right hand side letting me know, hey, this is what you have to tend to. Then I go into my hub. The BlackBerry hub is pretty much your unified notification center. It's where you go to respond to BBMs, text messages, Gmail, all the social networks that you connect to it, as well as your calls. It's very helpful to have everything in one place, and that's definitely one area where this phone is trying to excel. It's a lot about communication. Getting from one place to the next is a big theme in BlackBerry 10 OS. So when you swipe up, you're going to see the most recent apps that you have open, your 8 most recent apps. And if you don't want to go there, you can just swipe left or right all the way to the hub. But you'll notice that when I tap on the bottom, it's kind of like a really fast way to switch between them. So I can get to my hub by going all the way left, or get to the apps at the end by going all the way right. And whenever I need to get back to my active screen, I just swipe up again. Now, in terms of apps, there are some nice built-in apps from BlackBerry. For instance, StoryMaker basically creates like slideshows and videos, and you get to choose the music that you set it to. It's really nice. And then you have, of course, BBM. Now, when you want to acquire some new apps, you tap on BlackBerry BlackBerry App World. And then from there, you can get music, movies, TV episodes, books, and apps. Apps is kind of an interesting conundrum because when you go to acquire apps, there's a lot of choices. There's more than 125,000. But the key little asterisk that you got to put on there is that a lot of these apps weren't built for BlackBerry 10, and even worse, they weren't built for the Q10 specifically. Because this is at a smaller screen, there are certain apps that they have bad elements that take up a lot of room on the display, and they limit you. For instance, when I go into Songza, this is an app for streaming music, okay? If I want to just browse to a list of stations, that's perfectly fine. I'm able to get to it fairly easily. But there's one particular feature they have called Concierge, where it shows a list of stations that you might want to listen to based on the time of day and the week. You'll notice none of that's coming up because the Songza app wasn't built to scale correctly on this device. I'm not able to access one of its biggest features. So that's a major annoyance when it comes to this. But enough about software. This is what you really came to see. The physical keyboard, which is the big selling point of the Q10. Because of course, BlackBerry loyalists want that actual physical touch, the sense of touch that they get when you type A, the letter A comes up. But you also notice something else happened when I press A. From the home screen, all of a sudden, apps starting with the letter A came up, my contacts with the letter A. That's because the BlackBerry supports actions from the keyboard. So if I start typing C, it'll say call somebody. If I type E, it'll say who do you want to email? It'll search for apps with E in it, and then I can just scroll through different content that I have, and it's a really cool way of taking shortcuts to things. That's one of the benefits of having the keyboard. Describing the keyboard is a little tricky for me because I'm someone who spent the past 4 years doing nothing but virtual keyboards. So I had to kind of retrain my brain to use these physical keys. And I think if you're someone who's coming from one BlackBerry device to this device, the Q10 should not be a problem for you at all because it has very nice keys, basically familiar layout. It also offers you the option of spell check, of auto correction, of word suggestion. Now, the spell check and the auto correction are not as good as it is on the Z10 because they kind of figure you'll be a little more deliberate when using a physical keyboard. And I was kind of disappointed by that because it corrected most of the words that I made a mistake. But if I inserted an extra letter, it didn't do as good of a job to fix it. So that was one thing that kind of disappointed me about it. But overall, I think anyone who's experienced with a physical keyboard should be fine. And people who are coming from a virtual device might need to spend a little more time kind of retraining their brain because the autocorrection is not going to be as robust and as helpful as it's been in the past. It does still offer word suggestion along the way. Even though it's a little odd to jump from the physical key to the virtual to tap on it, I don't think you'll have too much of a problem transitioning. Everything that you need to know about the BlackBerry Q10 can pretty much be summed up in this little section right here, the keyboard. Now don't get me wrong, the BlackBerry Q10 is a good phone. Like I mentioned before, it has a really nice exterior and I really love the build materials and the overall feel and quality of the device. It has solid battery life and it has a solid, attractive software. Even though you have some problems with the app ecosystem, the built-in apps are for the most part, very enticing, especially if you're someone who communicates a lot with other people on BlackBerry devices. At the same time, you're going to make sacrifices along the way. So yes, you will get a nice quality screen. At the same time, it's a small screen, so you're not getting a media experience as good as you would on other devices. Yes, you're getting a nice phone in terms of call quality, but you could easily get that on other devices. So the reason to get this, and the only real reason to get this, is if you're a longtime BlackBerry user or someone who just misses and loves a physical keyboard, because honestly, this is the last of a dying breed. All the phones that you see coming out now rely on virtual keyboards because people have gotten good enough at typing on them. But at the same time, there are some people who type faster and more accurately and better when they actually touch a key to do something. And again, this does come in handy when it's time to type in shortcuts and all of that. So I won't sell the keyboard completely short. But this is Andrew from MobileBurn.com taking a look at the BlackBerry Q10. It's available now at all the major carriers in the US, and it's very enticing if you want that physical keyboard. Otherwise, you've got some other options out there.